So I recently did a video about the trials of Jehovah's Witness women. Today is going to be a video about some of the trials of Jehovah's Witness men. These are just a couple of things that my male peers, who are now former Jehovah's Witnesses, have expressed to me over the years that they had to deal with, that they struggled with. And frankly, a couple of things that I saw with my own two eyes back in the organization. Let's get started. All right, so right off the bat, I know that there's going to be women who don't want to hear this, and I totally get it. They dealt with really horrible men in the organization. The Jehovah's Witnesses organization, it's just a fact, favors men. Abusive men and bad actors are allowed to flourish and thrive. However, the reality is most Jehovah's Witness men were also born into the organization. They didn't have a choice, just like you didn't have a choice. They were also raised in the craziness by their devout parents. So, they have a leg up. They have the upper hand just being born a man into the organization. What he does with that power as an adult is a different story. He goes on to hurt other people and continues the cycle. Yeah, that's where my compassion ends. If we're going to talk about equality and fairness and all that stuff, there's some good dudes who just got stuck in the same craziness we did. Throughout this video, my hope is that you can have a little bit of a perspective shift, not to excuse the bad behavior and the abuse of the bad actors, but to say, hey, that little boy sitting next to you at the Kingdom Hall, his mama also dragged him to the hall, beat his ass in the B school. A lot of Jehovah's Witness men didn't want to be Jehovah's Witnesses either. Okay, so in my video about women, I was saying that Jehovah's Witness women are not allowed leadership roles. Like, they can do little demonstrations and they can go preaching. They're a huge, massive source of free labor, but they're not allowed to serve in any sort of pastoral capacity, like teaching the congregation. Some churches have women pastors or whatever. They work in some sort of administrative role or, work with the kids. They're a program director of some sort. Jehovah's Witnesses don't have anything like that. Personally, I'm a firm believer that men and women have certain strengths or qualities that can complement each other, assuming there's mutual respect involved. They can come to the table and work well together, collaborate. I was trying to say that Jehovah's Witness women don't have the option at all. Leadership roles are just not on the table. So, this is where the perspective shift would come in. Men in the organization, that's an expectation that's placed on their shoulders from infancy. They are groomed from a very young age to want to aspire to be elders and ministerial servants. And unfortunately, a lot of them grow up they do take on these roles reluctantly. It's all they know. So, yes, are some of them just narcissistic bastards who relish in the power? Absolutely. And a lot of them are just good dudes who don't know any better. It's all they know. They've been raised in it, and it's like the thing to do. In fact, I did a video a few months ago, I'll leave a link in the bio, how the organization is bleeding. We know it's been bleeding for years, but a recent talk by Mark Sanderson showed how desperate they are for these young men to take the lead in the congregation. No one's stepping up. So they're lowering the age to be an elder to like 21 years old. 21-year-old elder. If you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, this makes sense. A 21-year-old, for all intents and purposes, for the pastoral responsibilities that come with being an elder, 21 is a baby. So, brothers have upward mobility in the organization and have the potential to become an authority figure, yes. But a lot of them don't want it. They, too, hate the grind, the congregation politics that come with being an elder. They, too, have seen the ugly side of the organization. Like maybe they do become a ministerial servant for a little bit and or they're on track to become an elder, and then they see the ugly side of the organization. They're like, oh, I don't want to go any further. Or they have good intentions and they want to try it. We all knew that one brother who wanted to change things from the inside, but it's just a tumor. You can't fix the organization, so they get jaded really fast. They just want to get married, have their wife and kids, not running a congregation and running themselves into the ground. They're working full time. That's another thing. Jehovah's Witnesses don't have paid clergy. They're working their asses off at secular jobs, to support their families financially. And then they got to deal with the congregation bullshit, and then they got dad and grandpa breathing down their neck. You're going to take the lead in the congregation. They got to deal with congregation bullshit on top of everything else. I'm not saying you got to boo-hoo feel bad for them, but it's just a fact, that they had their own pressures that were placed and expectations that were placed on their shoulders just because they were born a boy. And now they got to figure out how the hell they're going to get out of this situation and extricate themselves from the organization. All right? They didn't ask for this either. There are also Jehovah's Witness men who were victims of CSA. You can look up cases, Google CSA cases in the Jehovah's Witnesses. A lot of J-Dub guys struggle with anxiety, depression. Their crazy J-Dub elder father beat them. Ooh, or this one really bothers me. when young men in the organization who are raised by single mothers are targeted and exploited by the elder body. I saw this firsthand. Multiple congregations where I was growing up, my buddy's dad isn't around for whatever reason. I might not know the intimate family details, but his dad's not around. The elders swooped in, made him feel special. The father's not in the picture. Take them, these boys under their wing. We see you, we'll be your father kind of thing. And then he's stuck in the system. It makes sense. Sorry, this really pisses me off because it's targeting an emotionally vulnerable young man. And you can't blame him. This is the only security or father figure he has in his life. And I'm not saying that the elder is evil and has sinister intentions. Maybe he does. That happens. It just seems really convenient and loving, right? Look after the fatherless boys, but you're not empowering him. I'm thinking as the elder, you're not empowering him, this young man, or equipping him with the self-confidence for his sake. You're just doing it to get more hands on deck. Doing it to keep the corporation running. Just pisses me off. This cannot be overstated. The Jehovah's Witnesses are so freaking awkward, man, when it comes to dating. The whole dating thing is just... And I know that they're not unique in that way. You got Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, different churches that are cringy and awkward about it, but it's really hard. You got brothers who are all buttoned up and perfect, and they're looking for the perfect sister. And then, you have a bunch of people who just kind of get together, they get married, okay. For whatever reason, single sisters have their reasons they can't find someone they're compatible with. Maybe a brother can't, for whatever reason, find someone. It's just a weird dating pool. It's very small. It's hard to find somebody. What I saw, this was my corner of the world, okay? Maybe it was different for you. What happens is his confidence is low. He eats and drinks like shit. Jehovah's Witnesses can't do anything, but they can drink. So he drinks a lot. He doesn't have, there's men around, but there's no mentors to like I said, this was my experience where I grew up. Maybe it's changed. Maybe it was different for you. He doesn't have the type of man in his life to say, hey man, what are you putting in your body? Have you seen the sun today? Have you left your apartment? When was the last time you got fresh air and lifted something heavy? They spiral. They get into a really dark headspace. They're lonely. He's constantly lectured not to masturbate. He's like glitching. He weighs 140 pounds, but he's like Hulk just with like his shirt. Reading the Bible isn't going to make this go away. And just like sisters, they are told their singleness is a what? A blessing. A blessing. You're not tied down with a wife and kids. So you can go out knocking on doors. You can serve the congregation. You can take the lead. This is a blessing that you have all this time on your hands. That's not what he wants in his hands. He needs to get laid. He needs companionship. We're talking about grown-ass adults. So weird, man. People's heads get so screwed up. They get complexes. I knew of brothers who did eventually leave. And, he did find someone at work or, met someone through a friend of a friend. And now he's doing good. Like I said, he just had to get the hell out. All right, this one's really tough. It is really freaking hard if you are a PMO husband with a PME wife. So he's physically in, mentally out, or maybe he's completely out. He just stopped going to meetings and preaching, and she's physically in, mentally in. So she's still deeply entrenched. And I also wanted to say this. I think there's always this assumption that just because she's physically in, mentally in, she must be this nightmare, hardcore witness. And a lot of times that's not the case. She's a good person. She's well-meaning. She thinks she's doing the right thing. She really believes. And he's still he loves her. He's supportive. And thankfully, silver lining here, a lot of times the wife, because the husband is supportive and doesn't push her or pressure her to leave, she does eventually wake up. It's always good to hear when the wife finally comes around and then they can leave together. But a lot of times, that doesn't happen. She's super pissed. Marriage is strained. Maybe she acts out or it becomes a custody nightmare. And she didn't sign up for that, in all fairness to her. He wakes up. She didn't sign up for that, but neither did he. He didn't plan it to be that way. Kind of dovetailing this, I've seen the flip side where you have the wives who, they're good people. They're just indoctrinated. But then you get some just insane, narcissistic, unhinged nightmare wives where, he's still the breadwinner. He's taking care of you and your kids. He's a good husband and father. It behooves you to show him respect. That's another thing that really pisses me off. So yeah, just some problems that Jehovah's Witness men come up against. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of content, find it helpful, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video.